Okay, good afternoon, everybody. We'll get this webinar started here. It's 2 o'clock Eastern, so just to make sure we get everything covered in our 60 minutes, we'll get going. I know there's still a few people joining in, so we'll just they'll be able to pick up where we are. So welcome to the PowerPoint polling for new users webinar this afternoon. Just to kind of give you guys all an overview, the idea behind this webinar is to really stick to the basics from, downloading TurningPoint to setting up your hardware to building a couple of different types of polling questions. So it's really going to stick to the basics to kind of help you guys get out of the gate with working with the polling technology. Just a couple of points to make you all aware of. You can ask questions at any point during the webinar. You should see a little floating panel over on the side of your screen. It might be at the top depending on your setup, but there is a little QA panel. There's also a chat panel, so feel free to submit questions as we go along. Feel free to chat questions as well, and I'll do my best to answer those as we go. Any questions I do not get to during the webinar, they do get logged through our platform here, and I'll be able to address those afterwards as well. If we do get finished up early, I will stick around on the call to answer any questions that might come through. The webinar is being recorded today. It'll be processed and probably posted online sometime tomorrow morning. So anybody that attended or signed up and registered for the webinar will be receiving that link via email probably in the next 24 hours or so. So with that said, we will get started here. My name is Derek Abram. I'm one of the trainers here at Turning Technologies Canada. I've been with the company for about 5 years now. Started out on the sales side of things and sort of progressed over to the training side. I am a fantastic resource here at the office as you move forward and start using TurningPoint along with our various different pieces of hardware. So, feel free to note down my contact information here after today. If you do have questions, if you run into any problems, absolutely feel free to reach out to me. If you'd like to schedule further training, whether it's one-on-one or for a team at your organization, drop me an email, give me a shout, and I'm always more than happy to set that stuff up. So a quick look at the agenda here, sort of what my plan is to go over with you guys today. And again, this can change based on questions that come in. So if you see something on the screen as I'm working, feel free to ask away. And if that takes us down a slightly different road, then that is perfectly fine. However, what I want to cover is downloading TurningPoint, so right from the very, very beginning, right through to setting up your hardware, building some basic slides, polling your slides, and then saving your data and reporting. So that's kind of our roadmap for the next 60 minutes or so. That'll kind of help to guide us through things. So first thing I want to talk about here is downloading TurningPoint. For those of you that aren't sure or maybe don't know, the TurningPoint software itself is actually a free download from our website. So there's no cost to you individually or to your organization for you to acquire a copy of our software. The great thing about TurningPoint is you have the ability to create your slides, modify your presentations, and even test your polling slides without any of the hardware connected to your computer. And I'm going to talk about that a little bit later on. If you need to acquire a copy of TurningPoint, you can do so by going to turningtechnologies.ca and clicking on the Downloads menu option here on our navigation bar. And you're going to be wanting to download the very first item on the list, TurningPoint 5. Within TurningPoint 5, there are a few different versions available, and I'll just kind of outline what the differeces are. There's 2 PC versions and 1 Mac version. So if you're a Mac user, you have 1 choice. If you're on Windows, you've got 2. There's the install version and the no install version. The difference between the two is that the install version does require administrative rights to install. So if you're wanting to install TurningPoint on a computer within your company or within your organization, if you generally need somebody from the IT department to do that for you, the same will go for TurningPoint. Okay, so don't leave it till the day before to realize, oh geez, I need TurningPoint on this system, because you might end up in a bit of a pickle. The other option, the no install version, does not require any sort of installation. So it is a great backup to have in the event that IT can't get the software installed for you in the timeline that you have. If you're traveling somewhere and your computer is lost or damaged or something during travel, the no install version will run directly from a USB flash drive. Okay, so it's very flexible. Like, it does not need any sort of administrative rights to run. You can literally plug it into any computer with PowerPoint, and you can be up and running with your polling presentation. So those are the 3 versions of TurningPoint available on our website. They are all compatible with everything as far back as Office XP up to Office 2013. Back as far as Windows XP up to Windows 8.1 with the latest release, and then they're both 32 and 64-bit compatible. So it's one download that you have to worry about, and it'll work across virtually any system configuration or setup that you may possibly encounter out there. Okay, so that's the downloading process for TurningPoint. Next thing to talk about here is your hardware. Now, I have our more current hardware on the slide here, depending on whether you have equipment from us or not, depending on how long you've had that or how long your organization has had it. Your hardware might look a little bit different than what I've got on the screen now. The 2 guys here on the left-hand side, the RF Plus and RF receiver, those are kind of the brains behind the whole operation. That's what allows the keypads to talk to your presentation. So without that, your keypads have no way to communicate. Again, depending on how long your organization has had your equipment, you will maybe have one of these receivers I have here on the screen. I would say if you've purchased in the last or rented in the last sort of 12 months or so, you will likely have one of these 2 receivers. If it was prior to that, your receiver will probably be dark gray in color. They all work the same. The only difference is the slightly different design. And the RF Plus receiver also has 4 gigs of storage space built into it. So you have that added bonus of being able to keep that no install version on there, presentations and presentation data and that sort of stuff. When it comes to the keypads, they have, for the most part, looked primarily the same for quite some time. They did undergo a faceplate update a couple years ago. So again, you may have the black, silver, white models. You might have like a model that's a little more beigey color with orange swoops on the side. Everything works together. Everything works the same way. So you don't have to worry about your equipment working differently just because it looks a little bit different than what I've got on my screen here right now. All the equipment is radio frequency. Unless, I'm not sure if there's anybody on the call, anybody from D&D, they are generally still using infrared, which we do have available. However, for the most part, it's generally radio frequency. All the equipment has a 200-foot range, so as long as the keypad is within 200 feet of the receiver, it's going to pick the responses up from that participant, no problem at all. With it being radio frequency, the signal will go through things like walls and tables and chairs. So if you're ever in a classroom or a training environment where your computer is tucked underneath like a presenting podium or something like that, your signal will go through that podium. So you don't need to worry about the audience being able to see the receiver. In terms of battery and that sort of thing, the response card LCD runs on a 2032 calculator style battery. It runs on 2. Same with the response card, the standard response card here. and the NXT device runs on 2 AAA batteries. Typical battery life is every 12 to 18 months. We recommend replacing them depending on how often they're being used. So, you know, if you assume kind of like an oil change on your car, not that you would only do it once a year, but if you figure replacing batteries once a year, a couple bucks per keypad, that's really your sort of only ongoing maintenance cost. In terms of setting the hardware up on presentation day, you know, you're up there, you're getting ready to go live, you're setting up your room. All you have to do is plug your receiver in, launch TurningPoint, and make sure that your audience members have keypads in their hands. By default, everything ships out of our office pre-configured, ready to go. Everything leaves our building on channel 41, so your keypads will automatically talk to your receiver. There's no setup, there's no link up, there's no activation, or anything like that required to kind of get everything up and running. Okay. All right, so let's have a look at the next slide here. Okay. So next thing we'll have a peek at here is the TurningPoint Dashboard. So for those of you that have maybe used TurningPoint a little bit in the past, this may look familiar to you. For those of you that have never used TurningPoint, you know, obviously this is totally brand new. This is your TurningPoint Dashboard. And so what's going to happen is when TurningPoint is installed on your computer, just like any other application, a little icon for it is going to appear on your desktop. One of the number one things I find people have a hard time adjusting to is remembering that they have to launch TurningPoint in order to use it. Quite often what happens is, you know, somebody will plug their flash drive in, they'll just double click their presentation file and assume that they're good to go. The problem is that by default, TurningPoint does not load with PowerPoint, and therefore, if you spent, you know, an entire day building this great presentation with all these awesome questions in it, those questions are not going to work. So number one thing to remember to do is double-click your TurningPoint icon, which will give you your dashboard here, and then simply click your PowerPoint polling panel, which is going to launch you into your PowerPoint application with TurningPoint loaded. From that point, it's pretty much PowerPoint as usual, which we're going to see in a few minutes when I start showing you guys how to actually build a polling slide. Okay, so big thing to remember, always start out by opening the TurningPoint dashboard first. If you forget to launch TurningPoint, so let's say you open up PowerPoint and realize, oops, you know, totally forgot to launch TurningPoint. You have to shut PowerPoint down entirely in order to launch TurningPoint. If you try to launch TurningPoint with PowerPoint running, it will tell you that there's a PowerPoint application window open and to close it. Okay, so that's a step that quite often gets missed. Okay, so let's look a little bit into how the question's going to poll, and then we'll go over how to actually build a polling question. So you've probably noticed, you know, as I've gone through the last couple of slides in the presentation so far, they're just standard PowerPoint slides. There's nothing different about them. When I come to this slide, which is a polling question, you'll notice that I have a little floating TurningPoint toolbar that has appeared on the screen that says polling open. That will appear automatically on any polling slides in your presentation. And you can grab it and move it around, so if it's sitting over top of content, you can move it out of the way. Basically what it does is it tells you as the facilitator or presenter what TurningPoint is doing at any point in time. Now what happens is when the polling slide comes up, polling starts automatically. You do not have to do anything. Next thing that's going to happen is that the responses are going to start coming in. You'll be able to see at any point in time whether you have a group of 10 people or a group of 6,000 or 7,000. You can look at this and get a snapshot as to how many people have answered. Now, what's going to happen from here? A common question you'll get from participants, you know, can I change my mind? You know, I pushed 4 and I meant to push 1. Absolutely, you can change your answer, not a problem at all. As a participant, all you're going to do is push your new answer choice. So if I pushed 4 and wanted to change to 1, all I do is push 1. That becomes my new answer choice. And I can do that as long as the facilitator leaves polling open. Once polling closes down, my responses are locked in. Now, when it comes to closing polling, there are a number of ways you can do it. You can have it set up so that once everybody answers the question, polling closes. You can have a countdown timer set up so that after a certain amount of time, polling closes. Those are things we'll look at in another webinar tomorrow. The default way is to manually close polling. And the easiest way to think of this is to just picture the standard PowerPoint animation system. So on a regular PowerPoint slide, if you had, say, 3 pictures on there, and you had it set up so that each picture animates in after you advance your slide each time, TurningPoint works exactly the same way. So if you think of it that way, when you want TurningPoint to do the next thing, you're just going to advance your slide. So in this case, I want to close polling and see what the results were. So I'm just going to advance my slide once. Polling's going to close. Everybody's responses get locked in, and the chart appears with the results. Okay, so I can see right away how the audience responded. Now, with this particular question, there is a correct answer associated with it. And so what I did ahead of time, because it was a feature I wanted to show everybody on the webinar, I set a correct answer with a correct answer indicator on this question. You'll notice that the indicator hasn't shown up yet. I have full control over that. So if I wanted to engage in a discussion with the participants and say, okay, so why did 30% of you pick option number 1? I can do that without the audience knowing what the actual correct answer is. Once I'm ready to show that correct answer, all I'm going to do is advance my slide 1 time to trigger TurningPoint to do the next thing. And you'll see there that my predefined correct answer indicator appears beside the correct choice. So now I have that immediate feedback to the audience to say, okay, well, here's what the right answer actually was, and this is why it was the right answer. So rather than just kind of plowing through my content, I can have those discussions now. Okay, so that's how your question's going to poll within your presentation. Now let's work backwards, and I will show you how I built this question. So you'll see here, I'm just in my standard PowerPoint application. I've got all my regular toolbars along the top here. You'll notice the addition of the TurningPoint toolbar because we have TurningPoint running. So that's always sort of your visual cue to say, okay, right, I remembered to load it. And so anytime you want to do anything related to polling, you're always going to go to your TurningPoint toolbar. Whether that's building slides, whether it's saving data you've collected or any of that sort of stuff, that's where it's always going to happen. And so what we're going to do is we're going to start out with the new drop-down menu on the far left of the TurningPoint toolbar. The new drop-down menu has all your different types of polling slides that you can create. So everything from a basic multiple choice question down to an essay style, demographic assignment, priority ranking. So there's a lot of different types of questions you can create. Today we're just going to have a look at the multiple choice option. So I'm going to click on that. And what's going to happen is TurningPoint is going to build a template right in my presentation for me. And it's basically a matter of fill in the blanks. Now you'll notice that TurningPoint automatically picked up my PowerPoint template and my branding and everything. It will do that with yours as well. The way TurningPoint works is it uses your title text slide layout within your presentation template. So as long as you have a customized title text slide layout, it will pick that up automatically for you. If you don't, you can either go into your template and create one or modify one, or you can always right-click on the slide, go to Layout, and force it to use a layout of your choice. Okay. From here, it's basically a matter of fill in the blanks. Okay, so I'm just going to type in the same question I did just a second ago. Okay, TurningPoint's automatically going to label your answers ABC or number them 1, 2, 3, depending on what your software settings are set to. Okay, once you click outside of this text box that holds your answer choices, your chart is going to update automatically. And so it gives you sort of an idea as to what the chart's going to look like in your presentation. So if I had, say, an orange background color, I may want to change the chart color for option number 4. So it kind of gives you that sort of sneak peek. Now the other great thing is because everything on a polling slide is just a standard PowerPoint object, you have the ability to resize your charts, you can move them around, you can change your font types, font colors, all that sort of stuff. The only thing we recommend not doing is adding custom animations to a polling slide. And the reason we recommend that is because, like I said, TurningPoint does use the PowerPoint animation system to function. So if any of your TurningPoint animations get out of sequence, it's going to potentially cause you a lot of headache with those polling slides. You know, things aren't going to work properly, correct answer indicators are going to pop up before polling closes, and so we recommend to avoid it at all costs until you're very, very comfortable working with TurningPoint. Okay, now once you've built your question, if my question did not have a correct answer associated to it, if it was, you know, what's your opinion on this? What do you think of this? Tell us your feedback on this. I don't have to do anything else. This question is done. We can poll it. It's ready to go. However, we want to have a look at how to flag a correct answer. So what you're going to do is you're going to do that through your preferences panel here, and this just kind of floats around on your screen. And the correct answer settings are in your scoring options. You'll see that there's a drop down for each answer choice we've created. And so all I have to do is say, okay, option number 2 is correct. TurningPoint's automatically going to assume my other 3 are wrong. And I just have one more step left at this point, and that is inserting my correct answer indicator. To do that, we're going to go back up to the TurningPoint toolbar, go to the Objects menu, go to the Correct Answer Indicator option right here, and there are a bunch of predefined options within the Correct Answer Indicator menu, so you can always just kind of quickly grab one. There's also an option for custom. So if you'd like to use your own custom image, like a logo or a picture of some sort that goes along with the topic that you're presenting on today, you can use pretty much any picture format that PowerPoint supports. Just grab a check mark here. One thing to note is that when you're in edit mode, the correct answer indicator will appear right away. So if you've got your presentation just kind of sitting there on the screen up at the front of the room and people are filtering in, if it's in edit mode and I walk in and say, okay, there's a check mark beside option number 2, well, hey, I bet you when that question gets pulled, that's the correct answer. You know, everybody's potentially going to get the question correct, and so it's not going to really tell you what they know. So just, you know, be mindful of that. Keep that in mind, you know, as you're setting this stuff up. And so this question's ready to go. One thing I will highlight now at this point is how to put TurningPoint into simulated polling mode, because like I said, it is a really great, easy way to test your presentation. So to put TurningPoint into simulated mode, what you're going to do is on the TurningPoint toolbar here, right smack in the center of it, there's this polling section. And when you click on this drop down at the top, there's 2 options. There's live polling and simulated polling. By default, when you open TurningPoint, it will always default to live polling mode, regardless of what mode you were using previously. Okay? If you want to just be able to quickly run through and test stuff, just by flipping this to simulated mode, it's going to tell TurningPoint, hey, put 30 random responses into all my questions for me. So it's a very, very quick and very easy way to test a presentation without having your hardware present. One thing I will tell you is the presentation will run exactly the same way in simulated mode as it does in live mode. So if you are experiencing an issue with simulated polling turned on, or if something's not quite working or lined up the way you want it to be, don't just kind of chalk it up to, well, I'm in simulated mode, it'll work okay tomorrow when I'm with my audience. It will work exactly the same way whether it's live or simulated. Okay, so keep that in mind. If you're having an issue in simulated mode, it will transfer over. If it's something that you can't figure out on your own, absolutely feel free to give us a call. Great question. Can you change the color of the correct answer indicator? You can. Let me just go here. Whoops. So it's just like a standard object. So I can come in here through my regular PowerPoint formatting methods, and I can choose a different color for the answer indicator. So if green didn't necessarily fit with the template that I'm using, I can come in here, and if I wanted to say change it to purple or blue or something like that, absolutely, you can do that. Now, one thing to keep in mind is that the color setting for your correct answer indicator, it always defaults to green for the check mark. So you would need to change each check mark individually. So just keep that in mind. But yeah, absolutely, you can change the color of that answer indicator, no problem at all. Okay, one other thing, just while we're talking about changing colors, you can also change your chart colors. So what you can actually do is if you click on your chart object, your preferences panel will give you options for changing your individual colors on your charts. So you can come in here and change them to whatever you want. Now, this was only going to update this chart. If I wanted to update everything in my presentation, I can also do it by clicking on the Preferences button on my TurningPoint toolbar, and I can come in here and change chart colors and then hit Apply All, and that will apply those new chart colors to every single polling chart in my presentation. Now, one source of frustration, we get calls, and by the time people generally call us, they're frustrated. We'll get a call saying, hey, I'm trying to change my chart colors. I've got all the colors set. I hit Apply All and nothing happens. They stay as the default colors. The key step is that this drop down right here that on my screen says defined, by default, it's on PowerPoint scheme. So it picks up your template colors. If you leave it on PowerPoint scheme, you can change these colors all day long and hit Apply All, and they will not update. You need to make sure you set it to define so that TurningPoint knows, hey, I need to use these colors that the user's specifying. As soon as you do that and hit Apply All, your chart colors will take effect. Okay, so yes, you can change your correct answer indicators. You can also change your chart colors to match personal preference or to match your presentation a little bit better. Okay, great questions so far. Okay. One thing I'll mention really quick here, we'll run this question here and poll it. One thing I do want to point out, because it can function as a bit of a lifesaver. It's also a nice feature just to kind of know about, and that's the ability to repoll a question. You may need to repoll a question for any number of reasons. Maybe you closed polling early by accident. Maybe you polled a question, looked at the results, and then said, okay, well, geez, only 20% of the audience got it right. And you said, hey, so why did 33% of you pick Vancouver? And you engage in that discussion. The audience says, oh, well, I wasn't really sure what you meant, so I just kind of guessed. And so then you provided further explanation, and now the audience says, oh, hey, well, you know what? I want to change my answer, right? So now you want to repoll that question. On your TurningPoint toolbar right here, there is a button that allows you to quickly and easily do that. So there's a little green circle here with an arrow, and so all you have to do is click on that repoll button, and it's going to repoll this question. Okay, so we didn't have to exit out of our presentation. We didn't have to jump through any crazy hoops. We just clicked one little button. So now when I close polling, I'm going to have a new set of data. Okay, the nice thing is regardless of how many times you poll a question, you can re-poll a question 10 times if you wanted to. TurningPoint will always keep the data for each time you polled that question. So when you generate a report after your session, everything will follow the exact sequence that it followed when you polled everything live. So you'll be able to say, okay, well, we polled this question, 5 times, and here's the results the first time we polled it, the second time, third time, fourth time, and fifth time. Finally by the 5th time, the audience understood the concept, or we reached a consensus vote, or whatever the situation is. The reporting will keep track of all that for you automatically. Okay. So that's how you're going to build a basic polling slide with a correct answer indicator. Gave you an extra little piece of information there as far as repolling an individual question. And so that kind of covers a basic polling question. Yeah, I can certainly go through how to repoll a question really quick. So let me just pull this up here. So to repoll a question when you're in your presentation, on your TurningPoint toolbar right here, there's the little green circle with the sort of arrow in it. That's your repoll button. Now it's only available when polling is closed. So because when polling is currently open, if somebody wants to change their answer, they can just push a new choice. It's only going to unlock once you've closed polling. So all you're going to do is just click on that. It's going to reset this question. Polling is going to reopen. Audience can answer the question again. And then we get a new set of data. And again, just to recap really quick, each time you re-poll a question, TurningPoint will keep each set of data. So if you poll a question 5 times, when you run your reports later on, you'll see each time you polled that question. So you'll be able to see the results each of those 5 times to see, how the opinions progressed, how the knowledge progressed, or how the voting progressed on that particular thing. Okay. Oh, you're very welcome. No problem at all. Okay, so let's change gears a little bit here. So that's how you're going to build a basic question. Just as a side note, the additional topics webinar that we're doing tomorrow, the registration is almost full. However, because of the demand, I'm probably looking at doing another one early September. So if you can't make the one at 2 o'clock Eastern tomorrow, shoot me an email, and I'll make another session available early September. But just so you guys know, in that additional topics, we'll go through some of these other question types that you can create. But really, for the most part, these other question types you're going to build and set up in much the same way as this multiple choice question. They all are very, very similar with how they're actually going to get set up. Okay, so let's talk a little bit about saving your data that you collect, resetting your presentation, and what that means, and then we'll have a look at some reporting, and that'll kind of wrap us up. So one of the big things that TurningPoint obviously does is it collects a lot of information for you. It can be just anonymous polling data, which is the default way that it runs, right down to tracking how an individual participant has responded to a series of questions. And so TurningPoint keeps track of all that information as you are running your presentation. And that data is stored separately from your PowerPoint file. And we call that your session file or session data. So anytime you see session referenced in a context of TurningPoint, that's what it's talking about. It's all that data that you've collected. And so if you want to run a report later on, say you're doing your workshop today and you want to run your report next week, you want to make sure you save that session information. If you're doing, say, a series of workshops over the course of, say, 2 months with a large group of employees, and you want to merge all that data together at the end of that series, again, you're going to want to make sure you save that session information. Now, this goes back to earlier when I said anything related to polling is always going to happen through the TurningPoint toolbar. Same thing for saving your session information. Okay, so this is a step that a lot of times people make mistakes on. So generally what people will do is at the end of their presentation, they'll go, okay, great, I got all this information, file, save, perfect, I'm good to go. By doing that and clicking File, Save, all you've done is save a copy of your PowerPoint presentation. All the TurningPoint keypad data is still sitting there unsaved. So the key is to make sure on your TurningPoint toolbar you choose the option here to save your session. Okay, that is telling TurningPoint, save all this data that I just collected. Now, when you do that, what it's going to do is TurningPoint's going to say, okay, great. What do you want to call this presentation or this session file? And what I generally recommend doing is using a naming convention that if it's 2 weeks down the road and you want to come back and report on this, it makes it easy to reference, right? So as you use TurningPoint more and more, you're going to start compiling more and more data. And so this list is going to get bigger and bigger. So try to be as descriptive as you can. It just makes life easier for you down the road. So I'm just going to call this webinar August 26th, 2014, hit save. Okay, so that session data is now saved on my computer. I can close everything down and I can go back and run a report at any point down the road. Now, what's going to happen is anytime you have worked with a polling presentation, PowerPoint will always ask if you want to save your PowerPoint presentation when you close it. It doesn't make a difference whether you save it or don't save it. You can do either way. At that point, if by chance you have forgotten to save your TurningPoint session data for whatever reason, let's say a participant comes up and says, hey, I had a couple questions I didn't want to ask during the workshop. When you engage in a discussion at that point with somebody, if you forget to save your TurningPoint session data, TurningPoint at that point will say, hey, there's unsaved data. Do you want to save it? So you can't accidentally kind of throw information away at the end of a workshop. Now, what we're going to do is I want to talk about resetting your session. And to show you why it's an important thing to do, I'm just going to close out a PowerPoint and I'm going to go back in. Just give it a second here. And when it comes to resetting your session, essentially what that's doing is it's telling TurningPoint to start the presentation brand new as of right now. So PowerPoint's open, blank presentation, so I'm going to go File, Open, and grab that presentation file I just had up on the screen. Now, the importance of resetting your session file is this. If I just run this, what's going to happen is because there is pre-existing data sitting there, that is what's going to show up. So if I have used this presentation before, whether I was just simply testing it, whether I used it with a group of people yesterday, last week, earlier today, it doesn't really matter. If there's any data sitting in it, that old data is what will appear in your presentation. So we obviously want to avoid that, right? We don't want to have that happening. We don't want this new group of people. We don't want their information compiling on top of yesterday's group. So resetting your session is a very important step. We recommend getting in the habit of doing it at the very beginning of your presentation, before you launch it, even before your participants are in the room. And to reset it, all you're going to do is on your TurningPoint toolbar, you're going to click the Reset button here just to the right of Save and choose the option to reset your session. So that is your way of telling TurningPoint, clear out any existing information, reset my correct answer indicators, reset any countdown timers. We are starting with a brand new group of people, okay? So you're going to reset your session at the beginning, and you're going to save your session at the end, okay? Somebody just mentioned that my audio is cutting in and out. That could be our web connection. We've been having some issues with it today. Hopefully the recording is okay. We'll see if it gets better. Hopefully it doesn't get worse. Okay, so that's going to be saving and resetting. So let's jump out to the dashboard here, and we'll look at how to generate a report. Why is the check mark there? So the check mark, because it's a correct answer indicator, they will always appear beside your correct answer when you're in edit mode. So regardless of whether the presentation has been reset or not, this will always be here in edit mode when I'm building stuff or changing things. Once I actually launch my presentation, that is when the animation sequences take over, and the answer indicator doesn't appear until after the chart has appeared. So it'll always look like this when you're editing. It'll just run differently when you actually launch the presentation. Okay, you're welcome. Okay, so let's go back to the dashboard here, and we'll have a look at running reports. So all that data that you collect and save, right, because we just talked about the importance of saving, all that data becomes reportable. So you can run a report on an individual session. You can also do things like merge multiple sessions together, which is something that we'll get into talking about in the webinar tomorrow. But to run a report, all you need to do is on the TurningPoint Dashboard, so we don't have to go all the way into PowerPoint. We're just going to go to the Manage tab on our dashboard here. And down the left-hand side here, this is where all your saved sessions are going to start to appear. So that's where sort of the importance of that naming convention comes in, because as this list gets bigger and bigger, it's going to be harder and harder to keep track of stuff if you're anything like me and just flag things as new session. So the way this works is, by default, TurningPoint runs in what's called auto mode. So it just reads device IDs. So that auto heading right here is probably where the majority of your sessions will show up. In my situation, because I do a lot of webinars, a lot of web training, generally I end up using simulated mode and saving the data to show how the reporting works. So that's why I have a pile of stuff here under simulated, because TurningPoint has identified it as that. If you have created a participant list and you're tracking individual participants, TurningPoint will automatically save that information under the participant list here. So if I had used this TP5 demo course list as an example, when I save my data, it'll compile under here automatically for me. Okay, from here, it's just a matter of selecting the session file that you would like to report on, and then clicking the Reports button here. Okay, from there, all you have to do is start looking at the reports that you want to look at. So this is an example of a results by question report. And you'll see here that I did repoll this question here, where's our office located, a few different times. So like I was mentioning before, you'll see here that you get a snapshot of each time you polled that particular question. Okay. From your menu up here in the top right corner, you can change the report type that you're looking at. So if we were tracking individual participants, we could come in here and look at the participant report and start getting a breakdown on how each individual person in the audience has answered all the questions. Now, regardless of the report that you're looking at, you always have the ability to print. If you have something like Acrobat installed as an example, you can send the report directly to an Acrobat file. You also have the export menu here, so you have the ability to export to CSV, Excel, or HTML. So we give you those export options that are available to you. So if you needed to manipulate the data in any way, if you wanted to run your own formulas or macros or create a pivot table or something like that, You guys probably know better than I do. Once that data is out into an Excel format, you can do pretty much anything with it. Okay, so that's kind of a look at how your reporting is going to work. And I do see a question here, so let me just have a read here. Using a no install. Okay, so the no install version, where does it save information? So the no install version of TurningPoint saves the information to whatever folder it was run from. So if we're talking, if we take a step back and talk about the no install version of TurningPoint, it saves your data in your My Documents folder. It creates a folder called TurningPoint and then a folder called Sessions. So that's where it goes by default. With the no install version of TurningPoint, it will store your session files in whatever location it was run from. So if it was run on a flash drive, let's say for example, if that flash drive was labeled as your H drive, your session files will by default save on that flash drive. If your TurningPoint no install version is running from a network location, so if it was on like a G drive or something like that, which was a network drive that you accessed, that's where it's going to save automatically. It's going to go into, your username / TurningPoint / sessions, if that's where the no install version was sitting. You can always change the default save location. So if you click the preferences button here on the bottom corner of the dashboard, you will see this default save location, and you can change it to be whatever you want. So if your no install version is sitting on like a desktop folder, but you want it to automatically save to like your user folder on a network location somewhere, you can change this drop down here to be whatever you want. So if I go here into my network, I don't know if it'll actually show me any of our systems here because I'm connected on a different network right now, but I could browse and select like a network location that we have here, or a SharePoint drive or a Dropbox folder or anything like that, and just have my session files go there automatically. The nice thing with doing that is I only have to do it once, and then the session files will save to that location once that setting's been changed for my system. So that's kind of, for the no install version of TurningPoint, where it's going to save. It's kind of, it's a tough question to answer because it's going to by default save to wherever the no install version is sitting. Okay, you are very welcome. Okay, so that again, that kind of wraps up the basics of the new user PowerPoint polling training session. So again, like I mentioned, we do have the advanced topics one tomorrow. Again, the registration is starting to fill up. So if you're not able to get registered for it, or if tomorrow doesn't work for you, shoot me an email. And like I said, I am looking at doing another additional topic session early September, or maybe potentially a couple of them. This was the third basic one that we did, and we've had fabulous turnout. So, if you do want to participate in additional topics and tomorrow at 2 o'clock Eastern does not work for you, or you can't get registered, again, drop me an email and let me know, and I'll make another session available at the beginning of September, or very worst case, send you a recording of the one tomorrow. So that wraps up what I wanted to go over today with this webinar. We did finish up a few minutes early, so I will stick around, so feel free to chat questions or send them through the QA panel, and I'll be sure to answer them here in the last few minutes. Thank you very much, everybody, and again, if anything comes up, just let me know. Okay, so the USB for software installation, you can install from that. Depending on how long ago you got your kit, it may not necessarily be the most up-to-date version of TurningPoint. So if it's something that you've had for a little bit, I generally recommend downloading it from our website. Our website always has the most current version of TurningPoint. So to make sure you've got the latest version, I would say grab it from our website. But otherwise, if you just got your kit, in the last few months, then the version on the USB stick will be current. Okay, there's a great question. What if you have more than 10 voting options? So that, unfortunately, with a multiple choice question, the multiple choice question is limited to 10. That's just, it's the way the keypads are set up. They've only got the 10 answer choice buttons, so that's kind of your limitation. So you've really got two things. If you are doing multiple choice, you can split them over a couple of question slides. So you can kind of say to the audience, hey, if the answer choice you want to make isn't here, wait for the next slide. It'll probably be on that one. So that's kind of one way. Depending on the hardware that you have, if you've got our NXT keypad or our new QT keypad with the full keyboard, or if you're using our web polling, you could use like a short answer fill in the blank style question where you could ask the question, but now you're not limited to multiple choice. The audience members can type in anything they want. So that's kind of the other way you can approach that. But when you start getting into more than 10 answer choices, it gets a little bit tricky because with multiple choice, like I said, you are kind of limited. Okay. So live polling, yeah. So live polling. TurningPoint, again, is going to default to live polling when you open it up. So you'll see here when I relaunched, it went to live polling. So that's the default way that it works. So if you were doing simulated polling for any reason, say you were in the room half an hour before your participants start to show up and you were on simulated mode, just, running through testing stuff, just make sure you flip it back to live polling mode, but you can just toggle between the two modes here just by changing this drop down. And that's all you've got to do as far as flipping back and forth. So again, simulated mode you're going to want to use if you don't have the receiver with you and you don't have the keypad set up and you just kind of want to do a quick test as you're building stuff. Simulated mode is great for that. Otherwise, TurningPoint is going to default to live mode and assume you have a receiver plugged in with a set of keypads there with you. Okay, so if you have a PowerPoint template, how do you download it into TurningPoint? So all you have to do is if you have an existing PowerPoint template that you want to use to build a presentation that has polling slides, or if you've got an existing presentation and you say, okay, I've been using this for the last couple months without polling questions. Now we've got access to TurningPoint and keypads and stuff, so I want to add questions to this presentation. All you have to do to sort of start doing that is to launch TurningPoint, so open up your dashboard and choose your option for PowerPoint polling. And when PowerPoint comes up with TurningPoint running, all you've got to do is just open your presentation like you normally would. So I would go File, Open, and if this PowerPoint Polling Basics was my presentation or my template that I wanted to use, I just select it. TurningPoint's going to open it up, and from here I just basically start either building my presentation from scratch if this is a blank template, or if this is my actual presentation, I can just start inserting polling slides anywhere I want. Okay. The nice thing is, and one of the things I did not mention earlier, is that when you add polling slides to a PowerPoint presentation, whether it's a new one or an existing one that you've used before, we do not change the format of the presentation. It's still a standard PowerPoint file. So even though you add polling slides to it, it doesn't become like a proprietary file format that only TurningPoint can read. At the end of the day, it's still a standard PowerPoint presentation format. Okay, you're welcome. Oh, the live polling, so you can see where the you can actually see the chart changing in real time. You can do that. It is all dependent on the version of PowerPoint you're on. I believe it's supported in PowerPoint 2007 and 2013, but not 2010, oddly enough. So if you want to see the charts changing live in real time as your audience members are responding, on your preferences panel here in the polling options section, there's a little drop down underneath show results. If you do not have that drop down, it means that the version of PowerPoint you're using does not support the live polling results in TurningPoint. If you have that drop down, if you change it to during polling, what that'll do, and I'll show you here, let me just flip it to simulated mode. What it'll do is it will show the chart changing in real time as your participants respond to the question. Okay, now one of the things that you know, I like to recommend with that, you know, keep in mind that people are easily swayed, right? So if the live chart is up there on the screen and it's a question that has a correct answer associated to it, you know, if everybody sees, oh, well, geez, most of the audience is picking option number 1 or option number 2, a lot of people will start to change their answer choice to be that option that the majority is going with. So, you know, keep that in mind. Depending on what type of question you're polling, you may want to see the results live. But I have seen that happen a lot where, you know, the majority audience will flock to a particular choice because they see in real time the majority of the audience is going with that particular option. So, you know, just think about that sort of thing when you're setting that particular option up. Okay. Okay, perfect. So it looks like we got through most of the questions there. Okay, great. So that's the questions that have been asked so far. So I've been able to get through them all. Oh, there's another one. Oh, thank you. Okay, great. Another question. Sure, shoot. To load a participant list. If you have it in an Excel format, it makes it a lot easier to work with. To create a participant list, basically what you're going to do, this is normally something that I would cover in the additional topics tomorrow, but since it came up, I'll show you really quick here. So if you want to create a participant list, if you have everything in an Excel spreadsheet, you know, like first name, last name sort of thing, it makes it a lot easier to do. What you would do is on your Manage tab here, on the participant list dropdown, we would say we want to create a new one and then give it a name. Now, you can import an Excel spreadsheet of participants into a list. However, I find it's a lot easier to just copy and paste the spreadsheet into a participant list. That way you don't have to, you know, mess around with making sure everything's formatted right and it's in the right, you know, order and everything. So what you're going to do here is give your participant list a name. Hit create. And then this is where you would copy and paste your information from Excel. So if you had like a first name, last name column in Excel, you can just copy and paste. So if you had 30 lines with 30 participants, you can literally copy and paste the entire thing all in one shot, and it'll populate the whole way down. Okay, so it's very quick and easy to do. And then your other step here is just to assign a device ID to that participant. So, you know, keypad 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, if that was going to be assigned to me, that's all you would have to do. And then the day of, make sure that I get device 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. That's the only other thing you have to watch for. Okay, you are very welcome. Anonymous polling. So by default, TurningPoint runs in auto mode, so it doesn't know who's who. All it reads is your device IDs. So it's very easy to not have to do anything as far as anonymous polling. If you truly want everything to be 100% anonymous and you do not want TurningPoint to read even the device IDs, on your dashboard, before you open up PowerPoint polling, if you check off this anonymous box right here, what it'll do is it'll actually tell TurningPoint, you know, don't even read the device IDs. Everything's going to be completely anonymous. And it'll show you that here on this drop down here as well. If you forget to set it to anonymous, you can do that there too. And so TurningPoint will still gather the data. You'll still be able to see, 30% picked this, 10% said that. You'll just have no way to tie it back to an individual person or keypad. The other little bit of caution that I'll use, sort of let you know and sort of tell you to use there, is any question that is flagged as anonymous cannot be merged with that same question from another presentation. So if you're doing a series of workshops with a bunch of different groups of people and your end goal is to merge all that data into one big master file, if those sessions are flagged as anonymous, you will not be able to merge those questions. Okay, so keep that in mind. In auto mode, you can merge data. In anonymous mode, you cannot. Okay, so just remember that as you're using those anonymous polling features. Okay, perfect. So that looks like that rounds out the questions that are submitted. If you didn't get a chance to submit questions today, feel free to fire them to me via email or give me a shout. I will be posting this recording, like I said, within the next sort of 24 hours or so, and I'll be sending that out. So thanks again, everybody, for coming out and participating, and hopefully we see you soon